You ever plan the perfect office Christmas party only to find out your boyfriend's been lying to you under the same mistletoe you hung yourself? Yeah, that was me. They thought I'd smile, serve cocoa, and stay quiet, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My name is Marissa. I'm 34 years old. And this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. The peppermint cocoa still burned faintly in my throat. I had barely taken a sip before setting it down beside a stack of paper plates. My heels ached from circling the office for hours, checking the gift table, arranging the Secret Santa tags, making sure the RSVP list matched every +1. 3 weeks of planning, and my name wasn't even printed on the invitation. That had never bothered me before. I told myself it didn't matter who got credit, as long as the room looked perfect. But that night, perfection felt heavier than usual. The office smelled of pine candles and cheap wine. Outside the tall windows, snow drifted down in slow, soft ribbons, blurring the Nashville streetlights into gold halos. Someone had looped a garland around the espresso machine. The blinking reds and greens flickered against the chrome and made the whole place look like a movie set. It was the Friday before Christmas, and everyone pretended we were a family. I stood near the projector table, pretending too. The blank white screen waited, humming. The slideshow, our year-in-review highlight reel, was supposed to start in 5 minutes. My cue to press play, make the room laugh, remind them how far we'd come. Derek stood a few feet away, talking to Mia from HR. He leaned closer than necessary. They laughed quietly at something I couldn't hear. It looked innocent enough, but the sound of their laughter pressed against my chest like a bruise I didn't remember getting. I looked down at the laptop, scrolling through folders to double-check the file. A new one sat on the drive. Same date, same naming format, different icon. For a second, I assumed it was just another upload from the media team. Then I saw the name. Holiday Memories, internal. Not one I created. I hovered the cursor there. The folder timestamp said it was uploaded 3 hours ago. I should have ignored it. Should have focused on the slideshow I'd spent nights perfecting, but curiosity is a small, stubborn thing. I opened it. Inside were thumbnails, screenshots, notes, personal photos, the kind that didn't belong on a shared drive. My stomach tightened as I recognized 2 faces in one of the preview tiles. I didn't click. I didn't need to. The image was enough to turn the air metallic in my mouth. Derek's arm around Mia's shoulders, her smile tilted toward him. I closed the folder, slowly, quietly. The music still played, muffled by chatter and clinking glasses. I kept my eyes on the screen, breathing through the static that filled my head. He glanced over just then, still, smiling, as if sensing nothing. I smiled back. Reflex. Years of office diplomacy made it easy, but behind my teeth, everything was fracturing. I told myself not to react. Not here. Not in this room I had built. Someone tapped a glass near the bar, calling for attention. Time for the slideshow. I swallowed, straightened, and cued the correct file. The first image appeared. Team photos, bad lighting, better memories. The crowd cheered at their own faces. No one noticed that my hands trembled slightly over the remote. For the next 10 minutes, I performed. I laughed at the right moments, nodded when they shouted jokes, accepted compliments for the decorations I didn't claim credit for. Every laugh echoed hollow in my ears. When it ended, I stepped aside to let the crowd mingle again. Derek came over, warm smile, arm sliding around my waist. "You killed it," he said. His breath carried a trace of mulled wine and peppermint. "Seriously, babe, that was amazing." I looked at him and wondered how many times he'd said that word, babe, while meaning someone else. The thought was quiet, dangerous, and new. He offered to get me another drink. I told him yes. Watching him walk away, I realized I didn't want the drink at all. I wanted silence. So I slipped through the crowd past Bree filming another TikTok by the candy table and pushed open the hallway door. The sound dropped instantly, the way it does when you close a door on laughter. The hall smelled of copier ink and cold air from the emergency exit. I leaned against the wall, staring at the phone in my hand. My reflection glimmered in the black screen. Steady eyes, perfect makeup, Not a single hair out of place. No one would guess that everything had just shifted. I opened the shared drive again on my phone. The folder was still there. I tapped once, scrolled quickly, taking in the file names. Late night catch-ups. Q4 notes, and one labeled plans. Inside were snippets, messages, attachments, meeting timestamps that shouldn't exist. Nothing explicit, but enough to paint a pattern. Enough to tell me how long this had been happening. I remembered every late night Derek claimed he was fixing bugs. Every morning Mia arrived early with coffee for two. I remembered how they laughed about work stress, how I defended them when others gossiped. The realization didn't come as a sharp wound, but as a slow, spreading cold. My heart didn't race. It slowed, measured, like my body knew what to do before my mind did. I closed the files, slipped the phone into my clutch, and breathed until the air steadied. Then I walked back into the party. Nothing had changed out there, at least not visibly. The lights still twinkled, someone still sang off-key near the karaoke setup, and Derek handed me a glass of white wine with that same easy grin. I accepted it, touched his hand lightly, and told him I needed a few minutes to check the cleanup schedule. He nodded, distracted, by someone calling his name. That was the thing about betrayal. It never looked dramatic in real life. No thunder, no spotlight, just small choices, unnoticed in crowded rooms. In the supply closet, I sat on a stool between stacks of copy paper and let the sound of laughter fade behind the door. I thought about everything I had built here, the trust, the routines, the quiet competence that made others comfortable enough to forget I had ambitions of my own. They thought I was lucky to serve, that my calmness meant contentment, but calm was strategy. I opened the Notes app and began listing the files, timestamps, and access paths I'd seen. No revenge plan, not yet, just data. Information was a kind of light, and light changes everything once you know where to shine it. When I finished, I deleted my digital footprints, logged out, and stared at the blank cursor for a long time. Snow brushed against the window outside the closet like static. I pressed my palm to the cool glass. Somewhere in the reflection behind me, Derek laughed again. I could almost hear it through the wall. I whispered to the empty room, "You think I'm walking away empty-handed?" The whisper felt like a promise. When I finally stepped back into the party, the slideshow had restarted on a loop. People danced now, half drunk and happy. Derek waved me over. I smiled and joined them. On the surface, nothing was broken. But inside, every piece of me had aligned into something sharp, precise, and patient. That night, no one noticed the woman moving quietly among them, memorizing every glance, every careless word. They would only remember her later, when calm turned into power. Because this was the moment it began. Not with an explosion. With silence. When the music finally thinned to a murmur, I waited until the last round of laughter blurred into the kind of tired cheer that meant people were gathering coats and leftovers. The office smelled of cinnamon and melting wax. Outside, snow flared under the parking lot lights like dust caught in a beam. My heart had slowed into something steady, mechanical. The decision had already been made hours ago. I was only walking through its shape now. Derek was near the bar, laughing too loudly at a joke that missed. Mia hovered a few steps behind him, refilling plastic cups no one wanted anymore. Every time someone passed her, she smiled too quickly, as if afraid the air itself would turn against her. I stayed by the door until the crowd thinned. Then I said the words lightly, almost kind. "Can you both help me clean up for a minute?" He hesitated, glancing toward the exit where our COO was saying goodnight. I saw the flicker of calculation cross his face. Courtesy or guilt, I couldn't tell. "Sure," he said. We slipped into the smaller conference room across the hall. The overhead light buzzed. On the glass walls, strings of golden reflection shimmered from the party outside. I closed the door. The noise softened into a heartbeat-like thrum. I turned toward them. "I found something earlier this week," I began. My voice sounded different, flat, quiet, unfamiliar. "Something you should probably see before anyone else does." Derek's shoulders straightened. "Marissa, if this is about work—" "It is," I said. I set my phone on the table. The screen glowed faintly, showing a list of file names and timestamps. Nothing explicit, just patterns. Mia folded her arms. You shouldn't have accessed private. I looked at her and she stopped. Private? On a shared drive? I kept my tone even. You uploaded documents into the wrong folder. It happens. But you edited payroll data from your own account. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. She opened her mouth again, closed it. Her lipstick looked too bright under the fluorescent light. Derek leaned on the table. This isn't what you think. Then explain. I slid the phone toward him. These log entries. Your ID badges recorded late-night access twice a week for 3 months. Mia's name appears on those files, sometimes 20 minutes after you leave. If it's innocent, tell me. He rubbed the back of his neck, searching for a sentence. We were double-checking numbers for bonuses. You know how end of year gets. After midnight? I asked. No answer. I took a slow breath, letting the air fill every corner of the silence. I could hear the faint echo of someone singing off-key down the hall, the thud of footsteps on concrete, the scrape of snow shovels outside. Inside this room, time felt suspended. Mia spoke next, her voice too soft. You're going to report us. I already did, I said. Not names, just irregularities. Audit will trace the edits themselves. They'll reach you soon enough. She blinked. Why tell us then? Because I don't want to lie about what I know, I said. And because you deserve to hear it from me first. Derek finally looked up. His eyes were the color of old glass, transparent, brittle. You planned this? I almost laughed. You planned it, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending not to see. He started pacing, muttering half-sentences about misunderstandings, pressure, someone else's fault. Each word dissolved before it reached me. I watched his reflection move across the glass wall like a trapped shadow. When he turned back, his expression had changed. The charm was gone. Only exhaustion remained. You're not thinking clearly, he said. You'll ruin both of us. Ruin? I repeated. No, just reveal. Mia's breath hitched. She pressed her hands together, knuckles whitening. I never meant... I know, I said. And I did. She hadn't meant for it to reach this point. People rarely do. They start small, an extra hour logged, a little flattery, a secret kept too long. By the time they notice the web, they've already become part of it. The silence stretched again. Outside the glass, a string of fairy lights flickered and went dark, leaving our reflections hovering in pale outlines. Derek spoke softly now. What do you want, Marissa? The question settled between us. What did I want? An apology? Justice? None of those words felt right. I wanted acknowledgement that the invisible work I'd done, the patience, the belief, had meant something, that I wasn't the fool they thought I was. I want honesty, I said finally. Starting tonight. He looked away first. Mia's eyes filled, but no tears fell. I gathered the folders I'd printed earlier, copies of audit trails, badge logs, memos that traced back months. I placed them on the table one by one, neat, deliberate. These go to compliance on Monday. The COO already knows to expect them. I'm not naming you in the first round, but once the system connects the edits, it will. Mia whispered. You could just delete them. I could, I agreed. But then nothing changes, and I'd still have to see both of you every day pretending we work on trust. Derek's jaw flexed. You're enjoying this. I shook my head. No, I'm surviving it. We stood there for a long moment, the three of us framed by glass and glittering reflections of a party still pretending to be cheerful. Then I gathered my bag. Mia spoke again, almost pleading. Please don't make it worse. Worse? I repeated. You made it worse. I'm just letting it end. I turned off the light. The room dimmed to a soft gray glow from the hallway. Derek started to say something else, but I didn't stay to hear it. The hallway stretched empty ahead of me, carpet dotted with confetti, the faint smell of cider and paper plates. At my desk, I picked up the small potted poinsettia someone had left as a decoration. Its leaves were bright, sharp, almost artificial in their perfection. I carried it to the elevator. The doors slid open with a sigh. My reflection looked calm again, almost serene. Inside, the soft hum of machinery reminded me of everything still moving, even when people stopped. I pressed the button for the ground floor. As the elevator descended, I thought about the caption I'd seen earlier, the one scrawled across my photo. "She thinks this job makes her special." The words didn't sting anymore. They sounded like prophecy. Maybe I was special, not in the way they meant, but in the way someone becomes when she finally stops asking for permission. When the doors opened, the lobby was empty except for the janitor polishing the glass. I nodded to him, pulled my coat tighter, and stepped outside. The cold hit like clarity. Snow crunched under my heels. Above me, the building glowed with the residue of the party. Music still faint through the walls, laughter from people who didn't know what had shifted. In my bag, the USB drive pressed against the fabric, small and solid as a heartbeat. Evidence, yes, but also reminder. Knowledge isn't vengeance until you choose to use it. I walked across the lot toward my car, the wind cutting through the silence. Nashville lay ahead, neon and frost and possibility. Tomorrow, people would talk. They'd wonder how long I knew. They'd call me cold, maybe ruthless. But tonight, I wasn't any of those things. I was just someone stepping out of the wreckage without looking back. The snow thickened, swirling around the headlights as I started the engine. For a long moment, I sat there, watching flakes melt against the windshield. My hands were steady on the wheel. Somewhere above the city, the sky opened wide and unfeeling. I whispered into the quiet, "You wanted secrets. I wanted truth. Let's see who wins." Then I drove away, leaving the lights of the office shrinking behind me until they looked like distant stars, beautiful, small, and gone. The investigation started Monday morning. By then, the story had already taken a life of its own. No one talked openly, but the walls carried murmurs. Every coffee pour, every keyboard click seemed to echo a rumor. Someone had turned the office Slack thread into a graveyard of deleted jokes. A photo of a mistletoe with a half-filled loading bar appeared in the Dawar General channel. It lasted 10 minutes before vanishing, but I saw it. And strangely, I smiled. Something in the air had changed. Not the bright kind of change that comes with new beginnings, but the heavy electric quiet that precedes a storm. People moved more carefully, voices pitched lower. The same desks, the same fluorescent hum, yet everything felt rewritten. Mia didn't show up that morning. Her desk light stayed dark, a single chair left pushed back as if she'd stepped away mid-sentence. Derek came in late, coat half-zipped, hair damp from sleet. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. Just powered on his monitor and sank behind it like a man hoping invisibility was still an option. The rest of us pretended to work, pretended not to listen to the whispers from HR. At 10:07 a.m., an email arrived. Subject: Administrative leave, pending review. Mia's name at the top, no signature beyond HR operations. The words were simple, professional, and devastating in their precision. I read it twice, then minimized the window. The room stayed quiet enough to hear the heat vents breathe. By noon, the head of compliance from Chicago appeared in our lobby. No warning, no video conference link, just real people in long coats, shaking snow from their sleeves. Carol led them mid-40s, silver streak in her hair, the kind of composure that makes others straighten their backs without being told. She greeted our COO, looked briefly around the floor, and began dividing us into interview rooms. When my name was called, I stood. No lipstick, no armor except a folder I'd printed over the weekend. Copies of emails, drive logs, badge swipe data. Proof that spoke in timestamps. The hallway smelled faintly of toner and pine disinfectant. My shoes made soft sounds on the carpet, steady, deliberate. Carol gestured to a chair across from her. Her tone was calm, neutral. "Thank you for cooperating." I sat, placed the folder on the table, slid it toward her. She opened it carefully, eyes scanning fast. I noticed she read everything twice before speaking. "You knew they were involved?" she asked. "I suspected," I said. "But I didn't connect it to payroll manipulation until I matched file edits with the compensation logs." She tapped her pen once against the page, No reaction otherwise. And you didn't report through standard channels. Correct. Why not? I met her gaze. The room was so quiet I could hear the fluorescent buzz overhead. Because the channel was compromised. Mia managed HR approvals. Any complaint would have landed on her desk before it reached yours. Her pen paused mid-air. She didn't write. You realize bypassing procedure can create its own liabilities. I do, I said, but silence would have created bigger ones. The answer hung between us. She studied me for a moment, then nodded once, a small movement that felt almost like understanding. We went through the files line by line. I explained what each one represented, timestamps, cross-references, discrepancies. She never interrupted except to clarify a date. When it ended, she closed the folder gently, aligning the corners. For what it's worth, she said, you've been thorough. I nodded, unsure if that was praise or warning. That afternoon, when she passed me in the hallway, she gave the faintest acknowledgement, a glance that carried something quieter than sympathy, heavier than politeness. It looked like respect deciding whether it was allowed to exist. By Wednesday, the verdict began to take shape. Derek was told to work remotely, pending final review. His chair stayed empty, a small void humming between our desks. People avoided mentioning him, but absence speaks louder than gossip. The IT team uncovered trails buried under layers of access permissions, multiple payroll edits from Mia's account, adjusting Derek's hours upward, unsigned and unverified. 6 months of small increments that added up to thousands. The money had traveled cleanly into his account, disguised as overtime. Rumor filled the blanks before the official memo did. Weekend cabin trips, ski photos, wine tastings, fragments from a shared cloud folder the auditors unearthed. Personal images labeled Team Retreat. The irony almost felt scripted. I sat at my desk that morning staring at my monitor, the cursor blinking on a blank document. My own reflection hovered on the dark glass, calm, maybe too calm. Every few minutes, someone passed behind me, their footsteps slowing, their conversations fading. The office had become a library of unspoken things. At lunch, Tina from finance caught me by the elevators. She hesitated before speaking, holding her paper cup of soup like it might burn her. Hey, she said softly. I just wanted to say what you did. That took guts. I looked at her, unsure how to respond. It wasn't courage, I said finally. It was necessity. She nodded, eyes lowering. Still, thank you. A lot of us noticed things. We just didn't think we could say them. Her words settled somewhere deep between exhaustion and relief. I nodded again, and the elevator doors opened, ending the conversation. The ride down felt endless, each floor a soft ding of release. By Friday, the company sent the official memo. Payroll Investigation, Resolution Summary. A bland title for something that had consumed weeks of my life. It arrived printed on thick letterhead, courier delivered, signature required. My name appeared in the third paragraph under compensation recalculation. They had corrected my underpaid hours, added backdated bonuses. The number wasn't large enough to change my life, but it was exact, real. Proof that the system, once forced, could be honest. At the bottom, Carol had written a short note in pen. Ms. R., your diligence corrected a serious breach of trust. Your cooperation is noted in your record. No flourish, no thank you. Just truth on paper. I folded it neatly and slipped it into the same folder that held every screenshot, every receipt. The evidence had become a map of everything I survived. That evening, the office emptied early. I lingered at my desk, watching the screens go dark one by one. Outside, the snow had turned to freezing rain tapping the windows. My reflection floated there, tired, grounded, free. When I reached home, I set the folder on my kitchen table, next to a candle and a mug of tea. The quiet of my apartment felt like oxygen. For the first time in weeks, I didn't replay conversations in my head, didn't imagine explanations. The noise was gone, replaced by the small, steady rhythm of the kettle. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out days ago, leaving something cleaner behind, a kind of stillness. I realized that freedom doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it's just the absence of fear. They had tried to erase me in whispers, to make me background, replaceable. But permanence isn't granted, it's recorded. I had recorded everything. I looked at the candle flame bending slightly in the draft from the window. Its movement reminded me of that night in the office. The hush, the flicker, the way truth caught light and refused to disappear. Some betrayals bruise. Others carve space. Mine left silence, and that silence had turned into armor. Lightweight, invisible, unbreakable. The strange thing about exposure is that it doesn't undo what happened. It just turns the lights on so everyone has to see the mess that was always there. After the investigation memo went public, people started treating me differently. Not with hostility, not with sympathy, just with a careful distance. The kind you give to someone who has already walked through fire and come out still standing. I could feel it in the pauses before conversations, in the slightly forced smiles at the coffee machine. They didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. I didn't mind. Silence had become familiar, almost comfortable. In meetings, people glanced toward me before speaking about process or compliance, as if I'd become a quiet guardian of order. It wasn't power I wanted, but it came anyway, heavy as a mantle. I didn't carry it proudly. I carried it because dropping it would have meant losing the meaning behind everything I'd endured. 3 weeks passed before HR sent out the official hiring notice. The message was polished, corporate, impersonal. We're seeking a new HR operations lead. No mention of who was leaving or why. But the absence said enough. Mia's desk stayed untouched for days, the chair pushed in neatly, her nameplate still there. Every time I walked past, it looked less like a workspace and more like a ghost outline. Then, one morning, the desk was gone, packed away while the rest of us were in a team meeting about quarterly goals. When we came out, there was just an empty stretch of carpet where she used to sit. No one asked questions. We all just adjusted our steps so we wouldn't look at the space too long. Derek didn't return either. His employee account went dark. No goodbye email, no final Zoom farewell. Just silence. The kind that feels permanent. Later, I heard from Tina that he'd tried to appeal, called it wrongful termination, claimed the system had misread his edits, that it was all a technical error. But systems don't lie when you know how to read them. The audit trail was too clean, too consistent. 3 different coworkers had quietly signed witness statements confirming what I already knew, that Mia had bragged about gaming the overtime logs. One of them was Bree, the social media manager who used to tease me for my playlists during late nights in the office. One evening, she sent me a message. Bree. For what it's worth, I didn't think they'd go down like that. Me. They didn't go down, they tripped over their own lies. Bree. Still, you caught them. Me. They uploaded their own proof. I just didn't delete it. She reacted with a thumbs-up emoji, then added another line. We're pitching a Women Who Win feature for the company blog. You in? I stared at the screen for a long time, the glow reflecting off my tea mug. A part of me wanted to decline, to avoid becoming a symbol for something I didn't plan. But another part, older, steadier, knew how stories get rewritten if you don't tell them yourself. Me. Only if we tell the truth. Bree. Always. I didn't fully believe that. Marketing loves its polish. But I said yes anyway. Maybe some other woman somewhere needed to hear that survival doesn't require drama, just clarity. The article came out in February. They edited most of it, of course. No names, no mention of fraud or heartbreak. Just careful language about accountability, ethical culture, and integrity in leadership. It was harmless, safe. But halfway through the piece, they left one line untouched. One woman's patience can become another woman's blueprint. That was mine. I'd written it in a late-night draft, half thinking they'd cut it. They didn't. Maybe they didn't notice the edge in it. I printed the page and taped it to the inside of my planner. Every morning since, I've seen it before I open my laptop. A small reminder that even quiet revolutions leave marks. I remembered the months I spent keeping my suspicions locked behind a professional smile. The nights I stayed late, double-checking data while pretending not to notice how his stories changed. The mornings I brewed coffee for 2, believing in a future that had already been sold for someone else's weekend getaway. Those memories didn't sting anymore. They just existed, like scars after a burn, proof of healing more than of hurt. I started rebuilding my routine from the ground up, taking real lunch breaks, leaving the office at 5 without guilt, saying no to extra committees disguised as team fun, small rebellions, each one a thread in the fabric of peace. I realized I didn't owe warmth to people who only valued it when it made them comfortable. What I owed was honesty, to myself first, and to anyone watching quietly from the sidelines. And then, piece by piece, life softened again. Carol sent a handwritten note after the case closed. Her script was neat, deliberate. "Thank you for your professionalism and courage," she wrote. No corporate boilerplate, just human words. A week later, an unannounced bonus appeared on my paycheck. Not huge, but significant enough to feel like acknowledgement. A new ergonomic chair arrived at my cubicle the same week. No explanation. Just a small tag that read, "Facilities upgrade, approved by management." I smiled when I saw it. Sometimes respect doesn't come in applause. It comes in the form of lumbar support. Spring crept into the city with quiet rains and redbuds blooming along the highway medians. One afternoon, as I returned from lunch, someone knocked gently on the edge of my cubicle. A new face, young, nervous, clutching a notebook. "Hi? You're Marissa, right?" she asked. I turned, surprised. "Yeah, that's me. They told me to talk to you if I ever wanted to learn how things really work around here." Her voice carried that mix of hope and uncertainty I used to recognize in my own reflection. I motioned to the spare chair beside my desk. "Pull up a seat," I said. She did, setting her notebook down carefully. The smell of rain drifted in, from the open hallway windows. For the first time, I realized the office no longer felt haunted. It felt possible. As she asked questions about workflow and approvals, I heard myself giving advice I wished someone had given me years ago, not about survival, but about boundaries, fairness, and self-respect. When she left, she thanked me quietly and said, "I hope I'm like you someday." I smiled after she walked away, not out of pride, but recognition. She didn't see the scars under the calm. She saw the calm itself, and maybe that was enough. I sat back, glancing at the printed quote inside my planner. The ink had started to fade at the edges from being opened every day. One woman's patience can become another woman's blueprint. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a map. I wasn't the secret in the story now. I was the proof that truth, once spoken, keeps echoing, quietly, persistently, until it changes the room. By spring, the office looked different. New policies, new people, a calmer kind of order. The silence in the halls wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. The hum of monitors, the murmur of keyboards, the sound of people double-checking their own work because they'd finally learned that details matter. HR had 2 names on the door now, fresh hires, both of them methodical, careful with their words. The rest of us noticed the change in small ways. Approvals took longer, meetings started on time. Transparency was no longer a slogan on a poster. It was a practice. I still sat at the same desk, at least for a while. Same peppermint tea steaming beside my keyboard, same black blazer on Wednesdays. But everything inside me had shifted. I moved through the space with a steadiness I didn't have before. The version of me who once filled silence with apologies had gone quiet for good. Sometimes, on slower afternoons, I'd catch the reflection of that winter night in the glass walls, the soft blur of string lights, the weight of discovery, the hush that followed. The projector hadn't just revealed a photo, it had revealed a pattern, the quiet architecture of deception I'd been living inside. I had smiled through it, worked through it, even loved through it. That realization no longer stung. It just lived in me like a healed scar, sensitive when touched, but whole. Derek never called. Not once. No message, no apology. I heard secondhand that he'd left the city, moved east to a small startup in Knoxville, a place without benefits, running on borrowed funding and caffeine. Maybe that suited him. Maybe he liked the illusion of starting over. Mia disappeared more quietly. An audit revoked her credentials after they found additional discrepancies. Nothing sensational, just a trail of signatures that didn't match. I read about it in a compliance bulletin months later, a single line at the bottom of the report. No drama, just consequence. I didn't feel satisfaction or pity, only completion. When legal called me in for the final debrief, the meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. The case was closed. My record was clear. Carol was there, sitting across the table, her tone lighter than I'd ever heard it. She slid a document toward me. Compliance advisor, internal offer. Same pay for now, but a line underneath promised review within the quarter. You've got an instinct for patterns, she said. Might as well use it. I said yes. Of course I did. On my first day in the new role, I wore red. Not festive red. The deep, certain red that doesn't ask permission to exist. The morning light on the glass doors caught the color and turned it into a reflection that seemed to walk ahead of me. I followed it inside. Passing the old floor, I slowed. The desks looked smaller somehow, the energy softer. That's when I heard a voice behind me. Ms. R? I turned. Samuel, the janitor. His gray uniform shirt was crisp, his name tag polished. We'd exchanged polite hellos for years, nothing more. He held the handle of a mop like a walking stick, eyes kind. I saw you that night, he said quietly. Back in December. Thought the system glitched at first, but then I saw your face on the screen. You didn't even flinch. I smiled faintly. I broke, I said. I just didn't show it. He nodded, tipping his cap. Still, you showed everyone something. Truth has a way of shining through, don't it? His words hung there, soft but solid. Then he went back to work, the rhythmic sweep of the mop echoing down the hall. I stood there longer than I meant to, letting the moment settle. It wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about acknowledgement, from someone who'd seen the aftermath without needing to explain it. Later, at my new desk, I unpacked a single folder, my old one, the one that once held every screenshot, every note, every late-night discovery. I didn't need it now, but I kept it as a reminder of what clarity costs and why it's worth paying for. I slid it into the bottom drawer, locked it, and exhaled. The work in compliance suited me more than I expected. It wasn't glamorous, it was precise. Details, documentation, pattern recognition. The things people once overlooked now came to me first, and every time I caught an inconsistency before it spread, I felt a small, quiet satisfaction, like stitching a seam before it tears. Weeks turned into months. The company stabilized. The whispers faded. A new rhythm took over, healthier, more transparent. Sometimes coworkers sought me out for advice, small questions about process or even personal boundaries. I never gave speeches, just simple answers. Keep your receipts, know your worth, trust patterns, not promises. One afternoon, I stayed late reviewing training modules. The building was nearly empty. The city outside was turning gold in the sunset. I walked past the conference room where it had all begun and saw my own reflection in the glass. Wall, older, maybe a little wiser, but unshaken. I touched the edge of the door frame, not out of nostalgia, but closure. The past didn't own that space anymore. As I rode the elevator down, the hum of machinery sounded almost like breathing. I thought about the people who once defined me by what I tolerated, how easily I'd blended in by being agreeable, by staying quiet, by convincing myself that endurance was strength. It took losing everything to realize silence could also be a tool, one you wield instead of one that cages you. When the doors opened, Samuel was polishing the lobby glass. He nodded once, and I returned it. A small ritual now, wordless respect. Outside, the air carried the first warmth of spring, the faint scent of rain on concrete. I paused at the curb, watching the building's reflection in a puddle. It looked clean, new, like something rebuilt after a storm. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what I was. Derek and Mia were just footnotes now, less villains than lessons. They taught me what happens when loyalty runs one way, when trust becomes currency. I'd stopped spending mine carelessly. In the evenings, I still made peppermint tea, still wore the red blazer sometimes. But I wore it for myself now, not as armor, but as memory. Proof that transformation doesn't require permission, it only needs resolve. The last line of that company blog post still sat taped inside my planner. One woman's patience can become another woman's blueprint. I read it sometimes before turning out the lights, not as a mantra, but as evidence that endurance, when aimed with intention, can build an entirely new life. If you looked at me today, you wouldn't see the woman who organized holiday parties or covered for late reports. You'd see someone who learned that foundations don't have to be loud to be strong. Because in the end, silence isn't empty, it's space. And in that space, I built something unshakable. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.